Hello, good afternoon everyone. So any questions from the previous class? We had started our discussion about Gupta Empire, very important topic for not just for prelims but also for mains examination, and it is also going to be quite useful for your art and culture classes, because if you have the context, historical context only, then you can appreciate culture in a better way. So all the developments, जैसे जब हम architecture पढ़ते हैं, when we study about temple architecture, the genesis of temple architecture goes back to Gupta period. One of the earliest temples, जैसे there is a very famous temple in Uttar Pradesh called Dashavatar temple at Devgarh. Now that was constructed during Gupta period. So even to appreciate art and culture, जो historical significance है वो clear होना चाहिए. So any questions from the previous class, by the way? पार्ट इसमें नहीं समझ में, क्या पार्ट नहीं समझ में आया? जैसे आई एम कंपेयरिंग विथ करंट टाइम्स जस्ट टू गिव यू अ पर्सपेक्टिव. जैसे जो चंद्रगुप्त वन है, श्रीगुप्त मे हैव रूल्ड अ स्मॉल रीजन, घटोत्कच मे हैव एक्सपैंडेड द टेरिटरी. तो मेरा जो मेन पॉइंट ये था that when we talk about Gupta Empire, in the previous classes I have talked about the difference between an empire and a kingdom. An empire often will include a much larger territory where there will be an emperor, but there will be also many local rulers, and the level of control that which emperor will have to those local rulers, that will also not be the same. जैसे मान लो जो कैपिटल के अराउंड जो भी लोकल चीफ्स होंगे वहाँ पे कंट्रोल ज़्यादा होगा, जो बहुत दूर होंगे वहाँ पे कंट्रोल कम होगा. So whenever we talk about empire, we talk about many provinces. Lot of those provinces will definitely enjoy some level of autonomy, if not complete autonomy, but some level of autonomy. So when I use the word Gupta Empire, even though the dynasty was not started by Chandragupta, but he can be considered the first emperor. Then I talked about that his empire, he did not rule entire India, he did not even rule the entire North India. So if I have to compare from the current context, जो अभी जो हमारे states हैं, उसके context में what was his rule? So in that context I have mentioned that it was modern Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Bengal, parts of Madhya Pradesh, ये मैंने बताया था, which was further expanded by Samudragupta. That will include almost all of North India, Gujarat being an exception. However, he did defeat many other territories also, especially along eastern coast, in southern India also. For example, he defeated even Pallavas kings. We will talk about Pallavas if time permits in today's class. But he did not annex them. They were not part of his territory. However, he did annex regions into northwest region, northwest frontier. And the Chandragupta II hai, Vikramaditya, Chandragupta II is when the Gupta Empire reached its zenith. That now almost includes entire of North India, including Gujarat, Rajasthan part, which was not part of Samudragupta's territory. And that was maintained by Kumar Gupta, that was maintained by Skand Gupta also. But after that, जो territorial integrity है, that was compromised and many independent rulers emerged, and that may have been fueled because of successive Huna invasion. And Guptas were जो later after Skand Gupta के बाद जो rulers हैं, they were not able to thwart such invasion. तो उस point का simple मतलब ये था कि I am trying to compare from the current perspective. ठीक है? Any other question? कालभराज एज, कालभराज करीब करीब 400 से लेके 600-700 तक आप मान सकते हो. फोर्थ आप ऐसे समझ सकते हैं कि 4th सेंचुरी, मिडिल ऑफ 4th सेंचुरी टू 7th सेंचुरी, ऐसे आप कर लो कि वहाँ पे क्लैरिटी नहीं है. वी डू नॉट हैव लॉट ऑफ इन्फॉर्मेशन, वी हैव इन्फॉर्मेशन फ्रॉम हियर एंड देयर. अगेन रिमेंबर, ये हमेशा अप्रिशिएट करने की जरूरत है दैट हिस्ट्री राइटिंग विल ऑलवेज एंड ऑलवेज डिपेंड अपॉन सोर्सेज. यू कैन नॉट जस्ट बिकॉज यू थिंक दैट समथिंग लाइक दिस वुड हैव अकर्ड, हम ये नहीं कर सकते. हमको सोर्सेज चाहिए. वो सोर्सेज आर्कियोलॉजिकल सोर्सेज हों, चाहे वो कॉइन्स हों, चाहे वो इंस्क्रिप्शंस हों, चाहे बुक्स हो. बेस्ट तो अगर यही होगा कि अगर बुक्स है, बट वी नीड सोर्सेज. जो कालभराज एज है, माई पॉइंट वॉज वेरी सिंपल दैट कालभराज एज जो पूरा है, इवन दो चोलास, चेरास, पांड्यास दे मे हैव लिव्ड, बट दे वर क्लियरली नॉट पावरफुल इनफ दैट दे गॉट थिंग्स इंस्क्राइब्ड. They clearly were not powerful enough that they could have large scale patronage. so that some, जैसे कोई भी जो पुराने ऑथर्स वगैरह होंगे, जो ग्रेट राइटर्स होंगे, स्कॉलर्स होंगे, they will be patronized by kings or at least by rich people, merchant groups, but clearly that was missing in this period of time, right? So that is why we do not have enough information about this, especially from about 4th to 6th 7th century. हाँ, अब पल्लवा का भी हम आज की क्लास में पल्लवास के बारे में भी डिस्कस करेंगे. पल्लवास का भी जो ओरिजिन है वो कितना पुराना है, बड़ा डिबेटेबल है, राइट? So Pallavas and Kalbharas may have been contemporary. In fact, Kalbharas and Cholas also may have been contemporary, but again, we do not have any source to know about them. कुछ कुछ कालभरा किंग्स के बारे में जो पता चलता है, एक दो नाम पता चलते हैं, वो कॉइन से पता चलते हैं. They issued some coins. They may have been, जैसे एक जो इन्फॉर्मेशन ये आता है कि they may have been follower of Buddhism because coins with some Buddhist significance have been found, but very few, very less in number. Any other question? So let's talk about the administration of Gupta Empire first, and then we will talk about society and economy. And when we discuss society and economy, one thing is going to be, especially when we discuss society, one thing is going to be very clear, that जो golden age जो हम बात करते हैं, golden age that was definitely in terms of prosperity, in terms of contribution in literature or astronomy or science, but clearly it was not a golden age in society. Lot of social evils or lot of social practices which still we consider those to be evil practices or practices which have to be abolished, they actually got strengthened during this period. So in that sense it was not that of a golden age. But in terms of prosperity, in terms of India's contribution to global GDP, in terms of trade, in terms of contribution to literature, scholastic achievements, art and culture, in all those areas, it was a golden age. But not in society. Lot of social rigidities, for example, caste system, for example, status of women in the society, all of those things actually worsened. So we will talk about that in today's class. So first, however, let's talk about the administration of Gupta Empire. In case of Mauryan Empire, we had a very good source, Arthashastra, which basically talks in detail about administration. We do not know how much element of Arthashastra was actually implemented in Patliputra, but nonetheless that still is a very good source. In case of Gupta Empire, we do have some books, we do have some inscriptions, and based on that we have a fair bit of idea about the administrative division, some important officials, etc. So let's start with first the administrative division. तो आप एक सबसे पहले तो एक लाइन लिख सकते हो. The empire was divided into provinces called bhuktis. The empire was divided into provinces called bhuktis, which were under the charge of uparika. Charge of uparika. So state and chief minister, इस तरीके से आप imagine कर लो. Bhuktis are states, uparikas are chief minister. Bhuktis were divided into districts. Bhuktis were divided into districts called Vishayas. Under Vishayapati, under Vishayapati, so Vishayas are like districts, these are like states. Below district, write down below district, cluster of settlements were known as so there are many names in different locations: Vithi, Patta, Bhumi, Vithi, Patta, Bhumi, Petha. इसमें जो वीथी है, that was the most important एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव डिवीजन आप ब्लॉक समझ लो, डिस्ट्रिक्ट के अंदर जो ब्लॉक्स होंगे, इमेजिन देम लाइक वीथी. पेठा, PETHA, पेठा. At village level, important functionaries were, Gramika, Gram Adhyaksh. So village was basically the smallest unit of administration. Village functionaries were Gramika, Gram Adhyaksh, write down the next paragraph. Vishayapati was assisted by prominent members of the town, such as Nagar Shresthin, in bracket you can mention chief merchant or banker, तो chief merchant होगा Nagar Shresthin, comma Sarthwaha, chief Karwa trader, Karma trader are basically those traders who roam around from place to place. Chief Karma trader, Pratham Kulika, So Pratham Kulika will be chief artisan. And Pratham Kayasth, chief revenue collector. Important officials at the central level were called Kumar Amatya. Foreign minister was called Sandhi Vigrah. नाम से भी क्लियर है, वी टॉकिंग अबाउट फ्रेंडशिप, हॉस्टिलिटी. संधि विग्रह. Write down, there was clear demarcation of civil and criminal law. civil and criminal law. Next, rulers focused more on cavalry than horse chariots. Rulers focused more on cavalry than horse chariots. अभी तक वॉरफेयर क्या था? It mainly focused, it had lot of chariots, but during Gupta period more focus was given to now cavalry, horse archery, ये चीज़ें ज़्यादा important है. Another very important feature during Gupta period, by the way, they did not originate during Gupta period, they actually may have originated during Mauryan period, is artisan groups called Shrenis, guild of merchants. बहुत सारे जो गिल्ड ऑफ मर्चेंट्स है थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री वी फाइंड मेनी प्लेसेस वेयर मर्चेंट्स मेड देयर ओन एसोसिएशन. जैसे अभी भी फॉर एग्जांपल वी हैव फिक्की और वी हैव डिफरेंट इंडस्ट्रीज जिनका खुद का अपना एक प्रेशर ग्रुप है जो गवर्नमेंट पे हमेशा प्रेशराइज करते रहेंगे टू हैव फेवरेबल पॉलिसी, समथिंग लाइक दैट, राइट. तो अभी भी प्रेशर ग्रुप्स हैं जो वन ऑफ द मोस्ट पावरफुल प्रेशर ग्रुप्स विल बी अ पर्टिकुलर एसोसिएशन ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर industry or in fact many industries together. So even in ancient ages, and by the way, the origin goes back to Mauryan period. We find elements of Shrenis even in Mauryan period. They may have continued after that during Kushanas also, but during Guptas clearly they were now very prosperous. So we find evidences of guilds of merchants into many cities of India. These guilds of merchants were in Gujarat also, in Bengal also, in Madhya Pradesh also, Uttar Pradesh also, like almost all important manufacturing centers, they had a guild of merchants. And often there were many guilds depending upon particular type of profession. For example, you have a guild of artisans, you have guild of, let's say for example, textile merchants. So different vocational activity had their own guild, and we call the word which is used for it is called Shrenis. But Shrenis played a very important role in administration. Often Shrenis had lot of autonomy in their day-to-day functioning. Often, if let's say for example a member is doing something wrong, then the member was punished as per the law of Shreni, not as per the royal law. Again, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि जो श्रेणी का लॉ होगा वो बहुत ही डाइवर्ज होगा, बहुत डिफरेंट होगा रॉयल लॉ से. And it will not again happen for each type of crime, but for many things it was there. Shrenis also worked as bankers, that if somebody, one member perhaps required some loan, then they were supported in their business activity. They also enjoyed lot of autonomy in their day-to-day functioning. So lot of rules were not applicable to them. So Gupta's ruler were very much focused on increasing the economy, and they realized that trade is a very important aspect, and they focused a lot on trade. And that is why Shrenis became very powerful. In many cases, Shrenis were so prosperous that many religious activities were patronized by them. Many temples were constructed by Shrenis, not by rulers. And we find that even after decline of Gupta, that tradition continued. That tradition which was in northern India, but also became very popular in Deccan and later on in south also. So we find many guild of merchants during different cities of Gupta's territory. तो ये एक बड़ा ही एक इंपॉर्टेंट एलिमेंट ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन है. आप लिख सकते हो, गिव दिस हेडिंग श्रेणी सिस्टम और सिंपली श्रेणी. श्रेणी in ancient India, write down, in ancient India, as early as Buddhist period and Mauryan period, as early as Buddhist period and Mauryan period, guilds of merchants, traders, guilds of merchants, traders, artisans, guilds of merchants, traders, artisans emerged generally a separate Shreni, existed for a particular group of person engaged in the same vocation. Write down the next paragraph. Engaged in the same vocation. Write down the next paragraph. These guilds often enjoyed lot of autonomy. For example, for a wrongdoing, members were punished as per the law of guild. As per law of guild. In some cases, they also acted as banks. Providing loans to its members. And issued coins. Many religious activities were patronized by them. So I will give you a very good example. आप सबने अजंता एलोरा के बारे में पढ़ा होगा. Both of them. अजंता एलोरा के बारे में हुआ है क्लास, आर्ट एंड कल्चर क्लासेस में, राइट? तो अजंता एलोरा जो केव आर्किटेक्चर है, दैट एक्चुअली स्टार्टेड बाय वाकटक रूलर्स. वाकटक रूलर्स वेयर कॉन्टेम्पररी ऑफ गुप्ता रूलर्स, डिस्कस किया था हमने. एंड जो अजंता एलोरा है, बाय द वे बोथ ऑफ देम आर पार्ट ऑफ यूनेस्को वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज साइट. एंड इवन दो इट वाज patronized by वाकटक रूलर्स, but lot of patronage also came from merchant groups. Many merchant groups did the construction of, they provided lot of resources for the construction of chaitya and viharas in Ajanta and Ellora. During Gupta period, just add one more line, during Gupta period, many of the guilds became prosperous. Now, another very interesting feature about Gupta administration is that we find some elements of feudalism. I am using a word here, feudalism. Can anyone define what feudalism is? Sorry? Conditional ownership of land. Can you more explain it in like more detail? What were other features of feudalism? In terms of, if I am saying feudalism as an economy or feudalism as an administrative system, what were other features of feudalism generally? Okay, serfs, जिनको हम serfs बोलते हैं, serfdom, the idea of serfdom. What else? There is a question that what is the meaning of guild? Guild is just simply, I am talking about a grouping. Grouping of merchants is called guild. Guild का simple सा मतलब होता है कि we are talking about a grouping of merchants. That is called guild. It can be artisans also, traders also. जैसे अभी जो pressure group, जैसे I told you that अभी जो pressure groups हैं, they are not exactly guilds, but you can associate, you can understand the concept of guild from modern pressure groups. Anyways, When I talk about feudalism, feudalism as an economic system was discussed a lot by Karl Marx when he talked about the natural evolution of economic systems, and when he mentions that जो medieval Europe है, it had a feudal system, and from feudalism capitalism came, and from capitalism it will be socialism or communism. So हम capitalism की जब हम बात करते हैं तो ideally जो proper traditional capitalism है, that talks about free market, that we are talking about free market, very limited control of government, laissez-faire जो हम बोलते हैं. There is a invisible hand of market which basically fuels lot of production, supply, demand, all of that. Government has to play a very minimal role. Of course, capitalism had lot of issues. How Adam Smith thought capitalism will emerge clearly did not happen. It became exploitative, and because of that exploitative tendencies, many authors talked against it. The most prominent is of course Karl Marx. He talks about socialism and communism. But even within capitalism, of course, you have now many variants. For example, जो Keynesian economics idea है, वहाँ पे Keynes जो है, he talks about lot of government intervention, that government has to especially invest a lot into infrastructure or things like that. So a lot of government-led expenditure is very, very important. So some element of redistribution. When I talk about feudalism, तो feudalism एक बहुत important चीज, जो feudalism का word का जो origin है, it goes to medieval Europe. अब medieval Europe में देखो क्या हो रहा था, around 12th-13th century. In Europe, king was there, many kings were there, but kings were frankly not very powerful. Kings did not maintain a very large standing army. They did not have huge amount of resources, and their entire kingdom was divided into smaller groups, and those smaller regions were ruled by feudal lords. So feudal lords, even though they attested their so they basically accepted the authority of king, but they were very autonomous in their day-to-day activity. For example, they often had a large piece of land. On that large piece of land, many people who are called serfs, they worked, and this entire system is called serfdom. So they worked for a meager of daily wage, right? So, and from time to time, feudal lords often, for example, if there was a requirement, they supported the king. And at the same time, they often fought with each other also. So within one kingdom, many feudal lords fighting with each other. That was also a feature. So central authority was not very strong, but जो locally authority है, they became stronger and stronger, and they actually, even though individually they are not as such stronger than king, but collectively they are in fact more powerful than king. So ये system जो है आता है medieval Europe से. This term emerges from the medieval Europe. Now people use that some sense, some elements of feudalism, is it present into other part of the world also. And many historians think that some elements of feudalism जो है, that was present into Gupta period. Even though king was very powerful, but there were many local rulers. These local rulers were given piece of land. There were many important officials who were given piece of land. Giving that piece of land as a result of that, okay, ठीक है, we have to give your salary and all of that. Many piece of land was given to religious places, religious people. For example, Brahmins were given tax-free land during Gupta period. ये सारे जो features हैं, these features are called elements of feudalism. Even though the true starting of feudalism into India, that occurred during time of Harshvardhan. That Harshvardhan, even though, so I'm going to talk about the very next topic. I'm going to discuss about Harshvardhan. This was the region ruled by Harshvardhan. He became ruler in 606 AD and ruled till 647 AD. But despite the fact that he ruled a very large territory, he had direct control in very smaller regions. Many of the regions, for example, Gujarat or even parts of Bengal, there were many local rulers, and these local rulers were very powerful. They can be considered feudal lords. As long as Harshvardhan was the ruler, all of these feudal lords, they accepted his authority. But the moment he died, the entire empire also disintegrated. Right? So feudalism का एक जो बहुत बड़ा drawback ये हो सकता है, वो ये हो सकता है कि in the absence of centralization, जो regional aspirations होंगे वो हमेशा बहुत strong रहेंगे, and यही जो regional aspirations हैं, they will also lead to emergence of regional kingdoms. So some element of feudalism is also found in Gupta administration. आप लिख सकते हो जरूरी नहीं है, जरूरी नहीं है। फ्यूडलिज्म का सिंपल मतलब है कि हम एक लैंडेड क्लास की बात कर रहे हैं। एक क्लास है, लैंडेड क्लास है, जहां पे सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी जो है वो वीकेंड हो चुके हैं। ये जैसे इन केस ऑफ हाउएवर अर्ली गुप्ता रूलर्स दैट विल नॉट बी द केस, बट इन लेटर गुप्ता रूलर्स दैट विल क्लियरली बी द केस दैट सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी दैट हैज एक्चुअली वीकेंड एंड मेनी लोकल रूलर्स हैव emerged. So that is why we say that early elements of feudalism starts. Write down. Some features of feudalism are found in Gupta administration. Some features of feudalism are found in Gupta administration. Gupta administration, such as अब देखो कंपेयर टू दिस, अब एक बहुत क्लियर ही हो, कंपेयर टू दिस मौर्यन एम्पायर. मौर्यन एम्पायर इज नॉट कंसिडर्ड एन एग्जांपल ऑफ फ्यूडलिज्म. व्हाई? बिकॉज जो मौर्यन रूलर्स हैं, जैसे कोई प्रोविंशियल गवर्नर है, वो प्रोविंशियल गवर्नर ब्यूरोक्रेट है. ही इज अ ब्यूरोक्रेट अपॉइंटेड बाय द एम्परर. राइट? जैसे गुजरात का कोई गवर्नर है, वो ब्यूरोक्रेट है, जो कि गवर्नर जो किंग ने अपॉइंट करा है, उसको डेली सैलरी मिलेगी, जो भी मंथली सैलरी है, वेजेस मिलेंगे. He does not own as such a piece of land and where he can claim lot of autonomy. That is not there. So in that sense, Mauryan Empire is not feudalistic. Gupta Empire is also not that feudalistic, frankly, but later part of Gupta, especially by when जो हम decline period की बात करते हैं, जो last के 100 years of Gupta period हैं, they can be considered some elements of feudalism started emerging. तो आप example में लिख सकते हो. Features of feudalism are found in Gupta administration, such as, write down in sub bullet points. Major part of empire was held by feudatory chiefs who offered homage to the emperor write down the next bullet point. Fiscal and administrative concessions were given to priests and administrators. Fiscal and administrative concessions were given to priests and administrators. For example, higher officials were paid in cash, but also given land grants. Write down the next bullet point. Religious functionaries were given land free of tax. By the way, who started this in India? ये इंपॉर्टेंट है जानना, सातवाहन. तो ये जो प्रैक्टिस है गिविंग टैक्स फ्री लैंड टू ब्राह्मण्स, बुद्धिस्ट मॉन्क्स, दैट वाज स्टार्टेड बाय सातवाहन. से डिस्कस किया था हमने प्रीवियस क्लासेस में, बट इट वाज कंटिन्यूड. इनफैक्ट एक जो रेफरेंस है जो हमको इंस्क्रिप्शन से पता चलता है, दैट प्रभावती देवी, आई टोल्ड यू इन द लास्ट क्लास दैट डॉटर ऑफ चंद्रगुप्त टू प्रभावती देवी वाज मैरिड टू अ वाकटक प्रिंस रुद्रसेन. So Prabhavati Devi, in one instance, we have found an inscription where she is giving a tax-free land to Brahmins. Such land was called Agrahar land. तो आप लिख सकते हो जैसे ये एग्जाम्पल में. दिस इज वाई दिस एग्जाम्पल इज इंपॉर्टेंट, बिकॉज वी हैव अ proper evidence in the form of inscription, and that inscription is covered into almost all textbook. NCERT, Upinder Singh, R.A. Sharma, कुछ भी पढ़ो, हर जगह इसका रेफरेंस है. आप लिख सकते हो daughter of Chandragupta II, daughter of Chandragupta II, Prabhavati Devi, provided tax-free land to Brahmins called Agrahar land. Tax-free land to Brahmins called Agrahar land. Let's talk about their economy. Give the next heading, economy. First thing first, gold coins in the largest number, they were issued by early Gupta rulers, especially by Chandragupta, Samudragupta, Chandragupta II, Kumar Gupta also, Skand Gupta also, but after that we do not find gold coins. तो आप लिख सकते हो, Guptas issued largest number of gold coins called dinaras. हम इंडिया के सॉफ्ट पावर की बात करते हैं. इंडिया का सॉफ्ट पावर जो है, जो स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट था, जो सबसे पावरफुल सॉफ्ट पावर जब हमारा था, दैट वाज 5th 6th 7th सेंचुरी जो है. स्पेशली जो इंडियन इन्फ्लुएंस, इंडियन आइडियाज है, दे आर पॉपुलर एज फार एज जापान, चाइना, एज फार एज सेंट्रल एशिया. इवन टुडे जो कंधार है, दैट इज नेम्ड आफ्टर गंधार, विच इज फ्रॉम एंशियंट इंडिया. जो गोल्ड कॉइन, व्हाई आई एम मेंशनिंग इट, बिकॉज दिनार इज स्टिल करेंसी ऑफ मेनी ऑफ द regions in West Asia and Central Asia, and the name origin of the word dinar goes back to Gupta gold coins. Write down. They also issued silver coins. And copper coins. However, copper coins were less in number. These coins, write down, these coins often portrayed king's love for art, war, conquest, as well as religious ideas. एक यूपीएससी का क्वेश्चन था, राइट ऑन दिस क्वेश्चन. इवन दो दिस क्वेश्चन इज फ्रॉम आर्ट एंड कल्चर, बट वी कैन अंडरस्टैंड we can answer this question if you have a good knowledge of history also. Write on here, how do you justify the view that the level of excellence of Gupta numismatic art is not at all noticeable in later times. देखो, इस तरीके जो क्वेश्चन होते हैं, वो आंसर आपको जो भी आपने इन्फॉर्मेशन पढ़ रखा है तभी सोच के तभी लिखना पड़ता है. जैसे आई विल गिव यू 2 minutes, that how you can answer this question. What will be the approach? Again, only 150 words, 10 marker question, but what will be the approach? Just give me the central ideas which you have to elaborate in your answer. What will be the central ideas जिसको आपको आंसर में elaborate करना है? बट आंसर हमारा कंप्लीट नहीं हुआ, राइट? आंसर अभी कंप्लीट नहीं हुआ है. आप बिल्कुल अभी जो आपने बोला बिल्कुल ही सही बात है. दैट वी कैन टॉक अबाउट न्यूमिस्मैटिक्स, एक लाइन में तो हम बता ही देंगे. वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट कॉइन विथ सिंपल कॉइन्स इशूड बाय किंग्स. कॉइन्स ऑफन प्ले, आप लिख सकते हो एक दो लाइन में, कॉइन्स प्ले अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल टू नो अबाउट स्पेशली इकोनॉमी, समटाइम्स पॉलिटिक्स ऑल्सो, बट मोस्टली अबाउट इकोनॉमी, प्रॉस्पेरिटी ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर रीजन इन अ पर्टिकुलर टाइम पीरियड. इस तरीके से हम लिख सकते हैं. Then of course you can talk about Gupta's numismatics. You can talk about the fact that largest number of gold coins, some of the most pure gold coins. The coins are very, the shape of coins hai, that also tells you the type of metallurgical techniques which are used, the material which is used. बहुत सारी चीज़ें वो डिटरमिन करेंगी प्रॉस्पेरिटी की. जो गोल्ड कॉइन्स का जो क्वालिटी है, जो शेप है, कॉइन्स जो पंच मार्क्ड कॉइन्स हैं, देयर वी हैव लाइक प्रॉपर पिक्चर ऑफ किंग. We have also religious ideas, king into different poses. So lot of care is given for minting of coins. It is not just random gold coin. Lot of care is given to that. तो ये थोड़ा बहुत आप highlight करोगे in first part of the answer, but that is only one part of the answer. In second part of the answer, you will highlight that why we do not find the same level of art in later time. अब इसका जो central theme तो simple ही है ना कि because later kingdoms इतने prosperous ही नहीं थे. So we'll talk about many reasons that after Guptas, you have emergence of many regional kingdoms. These regional kingdoms were not prosperous enough. They did not invest a lot into their economic administration. That is why पहले तो coins, gold coins हमको मिलते नहीं है. We find silver coins, copper coins. उसके बाद जो coin का shape है वो भी उतना regular नहीं है जो Guptas coin के time पे है. जो coin पे जो artistic जो भी motifs हैं वो हमको नहीं मिलते जो Gupta period पे थे. So इसी line पे आप highlight करोगे कि जो later kings हैं, they were continuously in conflict with each other. No kingdom emerged as a prosperous kingdom, large kingdom who could have patronized economic activity on a larger scale. तो इस पे आप highlight करोगे and ये आपका second part of the answer होगा. That why we do not find numismatics, with some examples that we do not find gold coins. We find coins of irregular feature. We do not have that much care taken in the minting of coins. ये सारी चीज़ें आप highlight करोगे. तो ऐसे जो questions होते हैं इनका देखो, ये यूपीएससी बहुत बार आर्ट एंड कल्चर वगैरह ऐसे लगता है कि ये फैक्चुअल क्वेश्चन है, फैक्चुअल टॉपिक है. बहुत बार है भी, थोड़े बहुत फैक्ट्स पता होने चाहिए, बट अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम इवन अ प्रॉपर अप्रोच दैट दिस इज द अप्रोच आई हैव टू अडॉप्ट एंड यू कैन राइट अ वेरी गुड आंसर. एनीवेज, राइट डाउन नेक्स्ट बुलेट पॉइंट. even though long distance trade with Romans had declined. Long distance trade with Romans had declined. Trade with neighboring regions and inland trade prospered. Trade with neighboring regions and inland trade prospered. Write down next bullet point. Land under cultivation increased significantly. Land under cultivation increased significantly. Land was divided in many parts. Kshetra, bracket mention cultivable land. Kshetra, which is cultivable land. Khila, wasteland, infertile land basically, जो बंजर जमीन है, wasteland. Aprahat, Aprahat is again jungle or wasteland. Vasti, which is habitable land. And Gapat Sarah, pastoral land for animal rearing. Pastoral land. Land grants such as Agrahar, write down next bullet point. Land grants such as Agrahar, given to Brahmins, Devgrahar, given for repair and maintenance of temples, became popular. सबको आपको पता होगा कि बहुत सारे इंडिया में मठ्स हैं जिनके पास काफ़ी सारा लैंड है, एकर्स ऑफ लैंड. तो जो पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ गिविंग लैंड फॉर द मेंटेनेंस ऑफ a religious place that emerged during Gupta period, and again that only became more and more prosperous with course of time. Many units of land measurement emerged. Smaller units were Angul, Hast, Dhanu, and larger units were Adhwapa, Dronwapa, and Kulyavapa. Sorry, it should be Kulya. लास्ट ईयर यूपीएससी का क्वेश्चन सिंपल से यही था. They had given these two terms, Dronvapa, Kulyavapa, and it was asked that what exactly are they. And there were two options given with respect to land. One was a type of land holding, another was a unit of land measurement. बाकी दो ऑप्शन कुछ और थे. But even within land you had to actually know. Just knowing that it had something to do with land was not enough. One of the option was land holding and land unit measurement. So land unit measurement है, that was the correct answer. So according to me, I keep emphasizing this, दैट एंशियंट मिडीवल आर्ट एंड कल्चर, ये तीनों मिला के कुछ 12 क्वेश्चन के आसपास आएंगे आपके। 12 क्वेश्चन में आई एम वेरी श्योर देयर विल बी 4-5 क्वेश्चन जो अटेम्प्टेबल नहीं होंगे, और वो अटेम्प्ट नहीं भी करना है, स्पेशली इफ यू डू नॉट हैव एनी फैक्ट। कुछ फैक्ट पता है आपको, कुछ पता है, आप एलिमिनेट करके आंसर कर गए, दैट इज अ बहुत बढ़िया है। बट देर विल बी 4-5 क्वेश्चन ऑल्सो जो कि सीटर क्वेश्चन होंगे, जो आप आराम से कर सकते हो, अगर वो बेसिक नॉलेज से आराम से हो सकता है। बट अगर जरा भी बेसिक नॉलेज नहीं है तो फिर वो 4-5 क्वेश्चन आपके छूट जाएंगे, जो आराम से नॉर्मल बेसिक बुक पढ़ के, जो हम नोट्स डिस्कस कर रहे हैं वो पढ़ के, आर एस शर्मा पढ़ के जो आंसर हो जाएगा। सो योर गोल शुड बी टू फोकस ऑन दोज क्वेश्चन। अब जैसे राइट नाउ, ऑल्दो बाय द वे जो दोनों टर्म है ये दोनों उपिंदर सिंह टेक्स्ट बुक में दे रखे हैं, right? But I keep repeating this thing that there are so many books written on ancient history or medieval history, and UPSC can pick questions from any of the topic. But nonetheless, at least the terms which we are discussing in this class and which is given in R.S. Sharma, or I may have missed them, then those terms perhaps you should know, along with the major development in politics, in society, in economy, in religion, in art and culture, right? And many questions you can actually solve. मौर्यस का जो ट्रेड था बहुत सारे ग्रीक रूलर्स के साथ रहा होगा, मतलब रिलेशंस तो पक्के से थे, अब किस लेवल का ट्रेड था वो क्वेश्चन आंसर करना बड़ा मुश्किल है, बट ट्रेड वाज डेफिनेटली देयर, इवन लैंड बेस्ड ट्रेड वाज देयर। बट यस, ड्यूरिंग गुप्ता पीरियड जो है दैट ट्रेड may have been there, maritime trade was there without any doubt. There are many ports on both eastern and western coast which are mentioned into text written during Gupta and post Gupta period. So trade definitely was there, but ये जो long distance trade है, trade with Europe, that had declined. Trade with West Asia, Central Asia, that may have continued, but trade with Europe, that had declined. Trade with Southeast Asia also continued. Again, जो nearer regions है वहाँ पे trade जो है that continued, but जो long distance trade had that declined. And yes, when we talk about trade with Romans, then Cholas, Cheras, Pandya जो southern kingdoms हैं वो सबसे prominent name होंगे. Right on. Irrigation was well developed. Irrigation was well developed with use of bardhya, to protect from floods, and khad for irrigation, drains were constructed which were called jal neer gamah. जल नीर गमह. So जो literal translation होगा that will be exactly drain actually. जल नीर both means water, gama where water can flow. So we are talking about drains here. Mining and metallurgy flourished. Iron, tin, lead, bronze, manganese, etc. were used. Right on in next paragraph, again a very important point. Guptas imposed various types of taxes. Which varied from 1/4 to 1/6 of produce. 1/4 to 1/6 of produce. some of the important taxes were as following. Some of the important taxes were as following. Bhag. Bhag was a regular tax that was generally 1/6 of the produce. Bhog, in bracket write down, tax on supply of fruits and vegetables. Tax on supply of fruits and vegetables. Bali. Bali was voluntary. Voluntary offering. Udiyang, tax for, write down, tax for maintenance of police station. Tax for maintenance of police station. Hiranya. Hiranya, king's share of certain type of crops. King's share on certain type of crops. And there is a very interesting tax called Vat Bhut. Can anyone guess ये किसके लिए होता था? Try to guess it. To clear an area free of spirits. तो जो अंधविश्वास है, that was clearly very much prominent, and to clear an area of free of evil spirits, a tax was used called Vat Bhut. आप लिख सकते हो. Winds and spirit. Winds and spirit. Shulk, that was custom duty. And last, clipped and upclipped. Clipped and upclipped, sell and purchase of land. Sell and purchase of land. Sell and purchase of land. Write down next point. Two type of traders, Shreshti. Two types of traders, Shreshti, settled traders, and Sarthvaha, Karwa traders, emerged. Many ports maintained large-scale trade. Many ports maintained large-scale trade. For example, Kalyan Port, Chaul, Kalyan Port, Chaul, Salopatna, Nalopatna, and Pandopatna. ये जो है सारे महाराष्ट्र कर्नाटका रीजन के आसपास हैं. मैंगलोर, comma, Mangalore. All these courts are on western coast. All these ports are on western coast in Maharashtra, Karnataka region. Right on. In Andhra region, the famous ports were Kadura and Ghantsala. And in Bengal, Tamralipti. So all of these are important port towns during Gupta period. That does tell you the type of trade, inland trade we are talking about. तो ये तो एक बहुत important aspect हो गया economy administration. Now let's talk about society and religion. So give the heading society. In society we have again similar type of questions. We first talk about social stratification. We talk about position of the vulnerable section of the society. We talk about status of women in the society, things like that. So let's try to answer this question one by one. Social stratification, that still is again Varna classification, but caste also. Varna and caste, often people think that they are actually part of same institution, but that is actually not correct. The Varna and caste system hai, they two are different institutions, but in the course of time they were integrated with each other. Historians have and sociologists have many theories to explain that how proliferation of caste and subcaste happened in the society. The most accepted theory which sociologists and historians agree upon is that this is the time where many tribes became part of the larger scale society, the fold of society. Many people from outside had settled. Remember 4 group of invasions: Greek, Shakas, Parthians, Kushans. Many people from outside they had settled. They were now of course mingling with local people. So many of the people who belonged to the warrior class and who were resourceful, they were often given higher caste, or they were given higher status in the society. For example, they were often given the status of Kshatriya, or they were given higher caste into the society. Many tribes, or perhaps people within tribe who belong to the lower classes, they were often given lower status or lower caste in the society. So the most accepted theory about proliferation of caste, that how many caste emerged into society, because caste does not have any sanctity in any of the older textbooks. ये बहुत clear होना चाहिए. जो हम बात करते हैं वेदास की और उपनिषद्स की, so Vedas and Upanishads, Vedas talk about Varna system, but as I told you, even the origin of Varna system, there is no as such restriction on the social mobility. Of course, that becomes more rigid into later Vedic age and into definitely Mahajanpad and Mauryan age. But caste जो है, caste was again, it became part of overall Varna system, that certain caste belong to certain Varna. That even, for example, even within Brahmins you have many subcastes. Even within Kshatriyas you have many names. Even within Vaishya especially you have many and many castes. Shudra you have many castes. So such proliferation of caste and subcaste may have occurred because of integration of many tribes, because of integration of many foreigners who had settled and now were living into India. There is also conflict. जब भी किसी भी type का ऐसा होगा, integration होगा. So integration can take many forms. One form can be of course conflict. जैसे many Puranas talk about people of Varna Sankar, that they belong to 2 different Varnas. That father belongs to different Varna, mother belongs to different Varna. So such Varna Sankars are mentioned into many of the Puranas, many of the Dharma Shastras textbooks. But one thing is very clear, that society became much more rigid. Surprisingly, the condition of Shudras improved in this period. So how they improved, how it improved is that now they were given land, There are mentions where Shudras own piece of land, and they have not, they own the piece of land. They are not renting it, or they are not landless labor, but they do own the piece of land. They were given, so some economic independence occurred. However, there is one group whose condition further deteriorated. We have talked about this group called Chandals. So Chandals के बहुत सारे नाम है. Some textbook calls them Panch Varna, fifth Varna. Some text calls them outside Varna system. But जो Chandals है, they were untouchables. There are many texts which talk about that when Chandal is entering, first of all, they have to stay outside the town. They cannot become part of the main town. They have to stay outside the town. Chandals were often involved into activities which were considered lowly activities into the society. For example, dealing with flesh, dealing with dead bodies, things like that. And whenever they had to enter the city, they had to basically use a stick, and they have to put that stick, they have to use that stick on the road so that a sound will emerge and people will know that Chandal is going by, and they have to look the other way. Now, how rigidly it was followed, that is a separate thing, but clearly a lot of things they were not allowed to use. Basic civil amenities, जो public infrastructure होता है, they were not allowed to use the public infrastructure. So untouchability became a very important aspect of society. So in that sense, there was a social deterioration. There was also social deterioration regarding status of women. Women के जो rights हैं, they became very restricted. This entire concept that woman as property of male, either first as daughter, जहाँ पे father का right होगा, then wife, husband का right होगा. This became very, again, a rigid concept into Gupta period. जैसे women had rarely access to property. However, some texts do talk about woman access to property. जैसे there is a very famous text written by Katyayana. Katyayana says that जो स्त्री धन है, now स्त्री धन is the property which woman acquires during her marriage. That lot of gifts are given to her from both her father as well as her father-in-law's family, and ये जो whatever property she is acquiring, it is her property. So this स्त्री धन, even today it is popular, it is famous in Indian jurisprudence. Apart from that, Katyayana also talks about that in certain cases women have access to property. They can mortgage the property, जैसे if they have widowed or if they have been abandoned by their husband, and then in such cases they can mortgage the property. So there are cases where women have access to property, but in general the property right of women, that is very very restricted. जो succession है, that goes to male heir. So that is again another deterioration. Another deterioration is that condition of upper class women that further deteriorated. They are not allowed to go outside and work. They often had very limited access to education. Same may not have occurred perhaps women of lower classes. So women of upper classes, their condition may have further deteriorated during this period of time. There is a very famous instance in जब हम बात करते हैं महाभारत पढ़ते हैं. So in Mahabharata there is a very famous concept called niyog. Now niyog was a concept that when, let's say for example, woman is not able to conceive because of her husband, or the husband has died, then the widow perhaps can either marry the younger brother or can conceive with the help of younger brother. So the concept of niyog है, this was popular, but then niyog was restricted, not restricted, it was now banned during Gupta period. So some aspects of society which we were more liberal in past, but we became more conservative during this period. So when we talk about society, then it was clearly not a very golden age. A lot of social rigidities actually became even more rigid during this period of time. So you can write down few things here. Proliferation of caste and subcaste. Proliferation of caste and subcaste occurred in society. Occurred in society. Many foreigners had settled in the region. Many foreigners had settled in the region, as well as integration of many tribes occurred during this period. Integration of many tribes occurred during this period. Every new tribe may have become a new caste. Every new tribe may have become a new caste. New caste. Warrior class of foreigners. Warrior class of foreigners. Tribal chiefs. Tribal chiefs were given the status of Kshatriyas. Were given the status of Kshatriyas. Write down next bullet point. Position of Shudras improved in this period. Position of Shudras improved in this period. In this period. They owned piece of land. They owned piece of land. They owned piece of land and worked as farmers. Farmers. Write down next point. Number of Chandals. Number of Chandals who lived outside cities. Who lived outside cities. Outside cities. Dealt in flesh, dead bodies, took care of dead bodies, took care of dead bodies, comma, increased, increased, they lived in very bad conditions and were not allowed, very bad conditions and were not allowed basic public amenities. Basic public amenities. Write down next point. Position of woman. Position of woman, especially women of upper varnas, especially women of upper varnas, declined, even though concept of स्त्रीधन आप ब्रैकेट में लिख लेना, गिफ्ट बाय फादर एंड फादर इन लॉज, गिफ्ट बाय फादर एंड फादर इन लॉ, concept of स्त्रीधन emerged women had limited right to property. Women had limited right to property. Example of immolation of widow, sati basically. Example of sati, immolation of widow, emerged during this period. Emerged during this period. एक लास्ट पॉइंट आप लिख सकते हो, नियोग which was allowed in Vedic period, नियोग which was allowed in Vedic period was not allowed in this period, was not allowed in this period. Niyog is very simple, that the widow can marry younger brother. After death of older brother, widow can marry younger brother. That is one aspect. Another aspect is that even for conceive, if let's say for example the couple is not able to conceive, then niyog can be used. Just again, Mahabharata is the best example, that how Kunti calls for gods when she is not able to conceive because Pandu पे curse है. Those again, कितने लोगों को इंटरेस्ट है महाभारत में, पढ़िए थोड़ी बहुत महाभारत. So महाभारत में जो बहुत फेमस स्टोरी है that Pandu is cursed because Pandu has hunted a couple thinking that they are tiger, but the couple then curse Pandu that whenever he is going to conceive him, whenever in any case of any aspect, any way of, if they plan to conceive, he is going to die. And because Kunti and Madri cannot conceive, and Kunti then calls the gods, different gods, and conceive with the help of gods. And even before that, in fact, the story of Dhritarashtra and Pandu, that is also example of niyog, that Dhritarashtra and Pandu, jo Vichitravirya has died, and Vichitravirya has now 2 wives, and those 2 wives then first call Bhishma, that Bhishma should do the niyog, but Bhishma denies because he has taken the oath of celibacy. But then Vyas is called, Vedavyas, the same Vedavyas who is attributed that he wrote Mahabharata. Vyas is called, and that is how Pandu and Dhritarashtra takes birth, along with, by the way, Vidur also. So ये जो niyog है, that is very popular during Vedic period. There are text, epic, one of the most important epic, Mahabharata, talks about niyog. But in this case, niyog was clearly now not allowed anymore. Give the next heading, and last heading, religion. Few very basic things which should be very clear. This is सबसे जो popular religion है, that is Hinduism, and especially within Hinduism, worship of Vishnu. जो Bhagavatism है, that became very popular. In fact, we now have evidence that जैसे Vishnu is given many names. Vishnu is Narayan, Vishnu is Krishna. But many historians think that Narayan may have been a tribal god, and when tribe got integrated to the larger social fold, then Narayan became one of the names of Vishnu. And similarly, Krishna was a god of a tribe, a Vedic tribe called Vrishni tribe, and Krishna again became one of the avatars of Vishnu. So this many gods, pantheon of gods emerged into one god, and that is how worship of Vishnu became very popular. So Bhagavatism was the most popular worship at this period of time, along with Shaivism. But some interesting things also developed here. जैसे Shakti का जो cult है, that worship of Shakti, that became very popular during Gupta period. Then worship of, not exactly worship, but a type of cult which is called Tantricism, that also emerged here. The Tantric culture. अब who are Tantrics? It's a very difficult question to answer. जैसे Tantrics are often, अभी भी जैसे जब हम word Tantric use करते हैं, तो we often have image in mind that where people often stay in Shamshan Ghat, like in where dead bodies are being used, and even eating human flesh. Such type of descriptions are given for Tantrics. But जो Tantra worship है, जो पूरा Tantra का concept है, that is frankly much more complex than that. Tantra basically talks about that every aspect of this nature has spirituality. Tantra does not believe in any type of social distinctions. It does not believe in any varna, any caste. It believes in God, but it does believe in that to attain God, we do not have to differentiate between things, including dead body. Even dead body is an aspect of nature, and how we consider dead body to be something which is polluted or something which should not be touched, things like that. That is not the right path forward towards spirituality. So जो तंत्र के ideas हैं वो बहुत complex ideas हैं. It will be very difficult to explain Tantricism. But nonetheless, Tantricism as a concept emerged during this period. Worship of many gods, for example, worship of Nag, जो Nag worship है, worship of Yaksh, Yakshini, all those things emerged during Gupta period. In religion, जो Brahmins है, they became supreme. Brahmins were given lot of patronage by rulers as well as by local rulers as well as by merchant groups. So they became supreme, and often with the help of patronage with the help of Brahmins, many of the new tribes and many of the new foreigners who had settled, they often took the status of Kshatriyas. So that is how again proliferation of many castes happened in the society. So you can write down few things here. The worship of Vishnu, Vaishnavism or Bhagavatism, worship of Vishnu became popular. Vaishnavism believed in bhakti, non-violence. Vaishnavism believed in bhakti, non-violence, which attracted many people. History was presented as a cycle of 10 incarnations of Vishnu. Even Buddha became one of the incarnations. किसी ने कल की क्लास में शमन ट्रेडिशन के बारे में पूछ रहे थे, दैट बहुत सिंपल, व्हाट वी डिस्कस्ड आफ्टर लेटर वैदिक एज. जो लेटर वैदिक एज के बाद जो बहुत सारा फोकस है आपका, less focus is on spirituality, more focus is on rituals, right? And how Brahmins have become some sort of middlemen between gods and people, right? And that was not liked by many people. Many people went against it. Many people interpreted Vedas in a philosophical way which led to Upanishads, and some people in fact rejected the authority of Brahmins and rejected the authority of Vedas, which led to emergence of Buddhism and Jainism. That is again Shraman tradition, part of Shraman tradition. Idol worship, write down, idol worship became a common phenomena. Gupta rulers were Vaishnavites, but they were tolerant of Buddhism and Jainism. Worship of Shakti as well as Tantricism. Emerged during this period. One thing which I should have discussed either in society or in economy is this concept of Vishti. तो अभी तो नहीं होगा, आप एक next write down in next paragraph few other things which you should know. जैसे एक दो तीन चीजें आप लिख सकते हो. The game of chess, it's said to be originated during this period. The game of chess, it's said to be originated during this period. It was called Chaturang. It was called Chaturang. Next, Guptas used Siddhamatrika script. Siddhamatrika script, which later emerged into other scripts, such as Devanagari. And one point which I should have discussed in society itself, but आप लिख सकते हो अभी यहाँ पे. Villagers were subjected to forced labor, called Vishti. By the way, ये concept ऐसे नहीं कि गुप्ता टाइम पे इमर्ज हुआ है. Even अर्थशास्त्र talks about the concept of Vishti, that people have responsibility, people have to pay taxes, and one form of tax can be Vishti, a forced labor, where you will be asked to work. मान लो कि कोई बंजर जमीन है, and that has to be converted into agricultural land. Or let's say for example there is a military camp, आपके village के बगल में military camp settled है. That camp has to be fed daily. You will not be rewarded for it, but it is your duty to do that, and it is your duty because it is like a tax you have to pay to the king. तो आप लिख सकते हो, villagers were subjected to forced labor called Vishti, which it was considered a type of tax. Give this one last heading. We are talking about two empires of ancient India. Both of these empires ruled almost all of India. Mauryan Empire was of course larger than Gupta Empire, but nonetheless Samudragupta and Chandragupta too, Vikramaditya, they had ruled a significant part of subcontinent region. Not just India, but significant part of subcontinent. So that is why comparison makes sense here. That let's try to talk about them on different parameter. One parameter is of course time period. I'm not going into that. One is before Christ, another is after Christ. So I'm not going to that part. I'm going to focus on the administration, economy, things like that. So many historians think that जो Mauryan Empire है, it was much more centralized compared to Gupta Empire. Gupta Empire was not that centralized compared to Mauryan Empire. First. Second, जो Mauryan Empire है, it has no element of feudalism. All of the provincial governors, they are like bureaucrats. But in case of Gupta Empire, we do find some element of feudalism, that some high officials are given a piece of land apart from the salary, and they have autonomy on that piece of land. You also have concept of tax-free land given to Brahmins. In Mauryan Empire, जो legal system है, that is not that developed, but during Gupta Empire जो legal system है, that is proper, well developed, right? जो taxation system है Mauryan Empire का ज़्यादा rigid है, Guptas are more flexible in that case. Arthashastra talks about many types of tax. There is a lot of focus on taxation administration. Guptas are more liberal in that way. Another difference is that Mauryan rulers patronized different religions. For example, Chandragupta Maurya became Jain monk. Ajivika was patronized by Bindusar. Buddhism was patronized by अशोका. बट जो गुप्ता रूलर्स हैं दे वेयर फॉलोअर्स ऑफ वैष्णविज्म एंड वर्शिप ऑफ शैविज्म. ओवरऑल द ट्रिनिटी ऑफ गॉड्स ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश that became very popular during this period of time, right? So that is another difference. Another difference is the decline of Mauryan Empire hai, it was mainly because of internal reason. Later rulers were not competent enough. But the decline of Gupta Empire hai, that is mainly because of external invasion that was done by Hunas. So there are many differences which we can consider. आप लिख सकते हो in bullet points. Mauryan Empire was more centralized and also bigger than Gupta Empire. Next, Mauryan bureaucracy was also more elaborate than Gupta's. However, judicial system of Guptas was more developed Next, while Mauryans followed a stringent taxation administration, Guptas relatively followed a liberal taxation system. Write down next point. Mauryan rulers promoted many religions, while Guptas promoted Hinduism. Write down the next point. Mauryan builds great architectural structures. Mauryans built great architectural structures such as stupas and pillars. During Gupta period, science, literature, astronomy flourished. And एक last point आप लिख सकते हो. Mauryan Empire declined because of internal reasons, while external invasions were mainly responsible for decline of Gupta Empire. There is a question that why did not Guptas construct many architecture? In terms of architectural heritage, जो Guptas का contribution है वो कम है compared to other rulers. Few things should be very clear. That initial architecture, before that the concept of architecture, it was limited to stupas and pillars, and that only happened during Mauryan period. I'm really sorry, I'm not very well. बट ड्यूरिंग गुप्ता पीरियड फर्स्ट टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर जो है, जो फ्री स्टैंडिंग टेम्पल्स की हम बात करते हैं, तो फ्री स्टैंडिंग टेम्पल एक्चुअली स्टार्टेड ड्यूरिंग गुप्ता पीरियड. बट यस, दैट इज एक्चुअली ट्रू that Guptas did not invest that much into architecture, but they did patronage different aspects of culture. Sculpture, for example, became very popular. Some temples were erected during this period of time. Because of prosperity of many traders, traders patronized other architecture. Very good example is again Ajanta Ellora. Right? तो हम ये नहीं बोल सकते कि आर्किटेक्चर हमको मिलता ही नहीं है, कम मिलता है, but the main focus was on many other aspects of art and culture, not on grand architecture. However, when we think about grand architecture, we often think of later rulers, especially जो southern India के rulers हैं. When we talk about Pallavas, Chalukyas and Cholas, the type of architectural heritage they have left, that is just wonderful. So in that sense, of course, जो Gupta का architectural heritage है, that is very much limited. But nonetheless, the very first temple architecture that actually started during Gupta period. Freestanding temples, especially freestanding temples. Any other question in this topic? So again, this is a very important topic for examination perspective. According to me, 80% of ancient history is done. We will talk about some. अभी तक क्या था? This part of ancient history I really enjoy, because it is like solving puzzles. You have very limited resources, and then you are trying to solve puzzles. You are trying to create a picture because of with the help of limited resources. The next part of history, early medieval and medieval India, I personally do not like it, because there is a lot of focus on political development, there is a lot of focus on battles, people are fighting battle with each other, there is very less focus on other aspects. So, but nonetheless, we have, of course, we have to know about that also. So, any question in this topic till now? हम बोल सकते हैं, but ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है. Even during late Mauryan period भी बुद्धिज्म हम बोल सकते हैं. बुद्धिज्म का जो पीक है वो तो महायान के टाइम पे आता है. इन इंडिया बुद्धिज्म का जो पीक है वो मौर्यन पीरियड है, बट अक्रॉस जो बुद्धिज्म का अक्रॉस वर्ल्ड अगर हम बुद्धिज्म का पीक की अगर हम बात करते हैं, सो दैट विल बी अबाउट फर्स्ट सेंचुरी बीसी, फर्स्ट सेंचुरी एडी, आफ्टर डिक्लाइन ऑफ मौर्यन एम्पायर, स्पेशली विद द इमर्जेंस ऑफ कुशानास. तो जो कुशाना पीरियड है, दैट कैन बी कॉल्ड पीक ऑफ बुद्धिज्म all across the world, not just limited to India. However, at this point of time, Buddhism had significantly declined, and definitely by Gupta period, it had declined significantly. Again, first, and there are many reasons behind it. The corruption which was present into other religions, that also propped into Buddhism. Patronage given by kings, that made Buddhist monks corrupt. Lot of other things. Buddhism, while initially focused on local languages like Pali and Prakrit, later Buddhist literature were written into Sanskrit, which again became a language of elite. बुद्धा का पूरा जो आइडिया है वो फोकस था भी नहीं एक ऑर्गेनाइज्ड रिलीजन पे, बट बुद्धिज्म became a proper organized religion with Mahayan form of Buddhism, where Buddha was given the status of a god, and he had many incarnations called bodhisattvas. And of course, emergence of Hinduism again, with many new ideas, with this focus on incorporating new ideas. For example, the best example is even Buddha is considered as one of the incarnation of Vishnu, and it is mentioned that it is because of the corruption which has emerged and how people have interpreted religious texts for their own benefit, and that is how one incarnation is going to challenge that, and that incarnation is Buddha. So there are many reasons why Buddhism declined into India. हाँ, हम ये बोल सकते हैं, लाइक फर्दर नॉट, आई विल नॉट एग्जैक्ट, सो डिक्लाइन वर्ड हम हिंदुइज्म के लिए हम नहीं बोलेंगे अब. सो डिक्लाइन नहीं बोलेंगे, हम ये बोलेंगे कि जो बुद्धिज्म, जो पॉपुलैरिटी ऑफ बुद्धिज्म है, दैट अगेन दैट डिक्लाइंड, बुद्धिज्म डिक्लाइंड, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट अगेन हिंदुइज्म अगेन फ्लरिश्ड, स्पेशली मेनी रूलर्स बिकेम पेट्रन ऑफ हिंदुइज्म. एनी अदर क्वेश्चन? इतने सारे एग्जाम्पल्स हैं. आर्यभट्ट सबसे बड़ा एग्जाम्पल है, वराहमिहिर सबसे बड़ा एग्जाम्पल है. जो मेटालर्जिकल टेक्निक्स हैं, ऑल दिस डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ मेटल्स, ब्यूटीफुल मेटल्स, ये सारे जो हैं, ऑल ऑफ दिस आर एग्जाम्पल्स ऑफ डिफरेंट ब्रांचेस ऑफ साइंस. इन मेडिसिन अगेन यू हैव सम ऑफ द ग्रेटेस्ट नेम ऑफ मेडिसिन बिलोंगिंग टू दिस पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. सो इन साइंस, इन मेडिसिन, इन एस्ट्रोनॉमी, इन एवरी एरिया यू हैव, जैसे आर्यभट्ट टॉक्स अबाउट दैट अर्थ रोटेट्स ऑन इट्स एक्सिस, and earth is revolving around sun, moon is revolving around earth. All of those things were known in ancient India, right? When Aryabhat talks about uh, approximates the value of pi, right? Or when he starts Bij Ganit, when Varahamir talks about, Varahamir has, by the way, ecological ideas. Varahamir was astrologer, astronomer, but he had many interesting things. For example, हम इकोलॉजी पढ़ते हैं, इकोलॉजी में हम पढ़ते हैं कि हाउ बायोटिक एंड एबायोटिक फैक्टर्स आर रिलेटेड टू ईच अदर. जैसे अक्सर ही आपने पढ़ा होगा कि अर्थक्वेक के पहले बर्ड्स का जो बिहेवियर है, एनिमल्स का बिहेवियर है, वो थोड़ा डिफरेंट हो जाता है. Although we need to collect more evidence to come to a scientific conclusion, lot of this is anecdotal. But Varahamir talks about similar ideas, that presence of certain animals can tell you presence of groundwater, something like that. So ecological ideas जो हैं. So there are many examples of development of science and technology during Gupta period. तो बहुत सारे जो लीगल टेक्स्ट बुक हैं, जैसे नीति सार हमने देखा, जो कात्यायन के स्मृतिज हैं, many texts such as Mitakshara Daya Bhag system which happened into post Gupta age. So many books of laws, details of laws and every aspect of law, civil law, criminal law, civil law which includes marriages, which includes succession, criminal laws which talks about punishment for different type of crimes, all of that was detailed, elaborated, and it was compiled into a proper textual format. In that sense, the judicial system was more developed. So it is basically the elaboration of the legal system. Any other question? हाँ जी. वॉलंटरी ऑफरिंग कभी कभी जो लोकल, एक तरीके से समझ लो एक स्टेट के रेवेन्यू का एक सोर्स है. जो लोकल चीफ्स होंगे फ्रॉम टाइम टू टाइम, दे विल जस्ट टू शो देयर फिडेलिटी. होता क्या है कि अभी भी बिजनेसमैन है, कौन सबसे ज्यादा, आपको क्या लगता है कि कौन खरीदता है हमारे यहाँ बॉन्ड जो है, जो इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड है, कौन खरीदता होगा? तो इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड जो बड़े बड़े बिजनेसमैन वही खरीदते हैं ना. तो ये जो वॉलंटरी ऑफरिंग का ये है कि राजा की कृपा बनी रहे. तो उस टाइप से, सो इट वाज, जो भी लोकल चीफ्स हैं, दे विल ऑफन गो एंड वॉलंटरीली गिव थिंग्स so that they will have some support or some patronage from the ruler as such. So in that sense, again, I will not consider it as a tax, even though Bali का जो word है, Bali का जो meaning है, it has transformed significantly. In early Vedic age it was voluntary, in later Vedic age it became obligatory. Here again I am using the word Bali as a voluntary offering. But this voluntary offering was a source of revenue for state. हाँ जी. वर्शिप ऑफ दुर्गा, हाँ बिल्कुल, वर्शिप ऑफ दुर्गा, फीमेल गॉडेस जो है. हाँ, भक्ति हम इन जनरल जो पूजा पाठ की हम बात कर रहे हैं. हाँ, आपका एक क्वेश्चन था. बिल्कुल. हाँ, हम कंपेयर टू, बिल्कुल. हाँ, तो आपको कंप्लीट योर क्वेश्चन. That's a very good question. The question is asking is that often we think that economic development leads to social development, but that is not necessary. First of all, this assumption is not correct. जैसे even in India there is a huge cultural lag. एक UPSC ने क्वेश्चन पूछा था कि some of the richest states जो है वहाँ पे फीमेल फोर्टिसाइड सबसे ज़्यादा है, और ये ऐसा क्यों है, राइट? तो ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि एक there is a concept in sociology which is called cultural lag, that आप इकोनॉमिकली आप प्रोग्रेस कर गए बट आइडियाज अभी भी कंजर्वेटिव है. इनफैक्ट इकोनॉमिकली प्रोग्रेस कर गए और कंजर्वेटिव आइडियाज आप फॉलो करोगे तो और डबल एज स्वॉर्ड है. जैसे जो फीमेल फोर्टिसाइड के केस में यू हैव एक्सेस टू टेक्नोलॉजी नाउ दैट यू कैन फाइंड सेक्स इवन बिफोर बर्थ, एंड यू हैव रिसोर्सेज ऑल्सो. मान लो पकड़े भी गए, पुलिस को पैसे खिला दिए, ऑल ऑफ दोज थिंग्स, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट फीमेल फोर्टिसाइड इंक्रीजेस फर्दर. तो ये जो कल्चरल लैग है, एंड एक तो ये चीज़ है. दूसरी चीज़ ये है कि we also are trying to compare things based on our values right now, right? जो हमारा definition of liberalism और conservatism है, उसको हम use कर रहे हैं. But yes, nonetheless, जो compared to today's definitions, definitely society became more conservative, and there is nothing, ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है कि वो out of the blue है. There are many cases where it may occur that economic development, prosperity happened, but overall society जो है became more conservative. बिल्कुल हम बोल सकते हैं। उसका एक बहुत बड़ा कारण है, होता क्या है, अब अगेन ये थोड़ा सा हम डिपार्ट कर रहे हैं हमारे मेन डिस्कशन से। इनका एग्जांपल ये कि जैसे हम पंजाब की बात करते हैं, व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट पंजाब, दैट विथ लॉट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट also religious element also became stronger, but there is a good reason for it. Why did it happen? Lot of economic prosperity also led to lot of evil practices, like for example consuming huge amount of alcohol, जो पूरा नशा वगैरह है, or some crimes, for example crime which in drunken state. So जो religion है, again remember religion is a very good tool to create morality not just at individual level but at the social level. That हम socially आप constrain कर सकते हैं लोगों को certain things. So the emergence of religious values and religiosity that actually occurred because of the evil practices which had emerged in the region of Punjab in about 60s 70s, right? So we can explain that. Now there is a good sociological explanation for it, that why it may have occurred. Any other question? Let's take a break here. After that we will talk about Harshvardhan, and we will also talk about Pallavas and Chalukyas. This is a map of India, a political map of India after decline of Gupta Empire. You have many rulers here. So for example, you have a dynasty called Pushyabhuti dynasty. We have a dynasty called Pushyabhuti dynasty. You have a dynasty called Maukharis. Then you have Chalukyas here in Deccan region, Kadam again in part of Karnataka, Pallavas, Pandyas, Cheras again emerge here. Pallavas are very powerful here. We have some other names like Ganga dynasties there. Maitrikas in Gujarat, they emerge. So many smaller regional kingdoms emerged in about 6th 7th century. यहाँ पे जो सबसे powerful dynasty है, this became the dynasty called Pushyabhuti dynasty. Pushyabhuti dynasty belonged to Thanesar region in Haryana. They actually created a lot of problem for Gupta Empire. So with decline, one of the reason of decline of Gupta Empire, when I talked about emergence of many regional kingdoms, one of them is Pushyabhutis. Pushyabhutis created a lot of problem for Guptas. It was set up by Pushyabhuti himself, hence the dynasty is called Pushyabhuti dynasty. In the course of time, Pushyabhuti dynasty became very powerful. And the last consolidation in ancient India, in northern India, that was done by a ruler called Harshvardhan, who belonged to Pushyabhuti dynasty. That is my next theme when we talk about history of ancient India. That this dynasty, so there is a very interesting story about Harshvardhan. Harshvardhan was not actually the designated prince. He was not going to become the king because he was second son of his father. But his sister was married to one of the neighboring kings, Maukhari ruler. But then his brother-in-law, his sister's kingdom basically, it was attacked by ruler of Malwa. And in this attack, his brother-in-law was killed and his sister was kept as prisoner. Now this was an insult to Pushyabhuti family. So Harshvardhan, bigger brother, his name was Rajyavardhan. Rajyavardhan was actually the designated prince. He would have become the next ruler. He went to fight Maukharis. He went to fight the Malwa ruler, defeated, but in the process he was killed. There is a very interesting story here, that in the region of Bengal, Bengal at this point of time was called Gauda kingdom. And in Gauda kingdom you had a ruler called Shashank. Now Shashank initially was ally of Pushyabhutis, or he was pretending to become an ally, because later he actually allied with Malwa ruler and got Harshvardhan brothers killed. So Harshvardhan became ruler when he was only 16 years old, but even at very young age he showed lot of potential. His immediate job was that he has to rescue his sister, and he was able to do that. But after this, because of his bravery, he was able to unite many local rulers, and he was able to defeat many of the regional rulers, and in the course of time a significant part of North India came directly under his rule. So he directly ruled some territory, and some territory he ruled indirectly. He shifted his capital from Thanesar to Kannauj, because Kannauj at this point of time there was no successor here, and Kannauj actually became a very prosperous region, and from there he ruled for some years. The problem is that after this, after his death, the Pushyabhuti dynasty also declined, and the entire empire also got disintegrated. He followed a very similar policy of conquest throughout the territory. He defeated many local rulers. When he was able to consolidate his rule in entire of North India, then he wanted to now attack the Deccan region. He wanted to move towards south. But in the very first battle, he was challenged by a Chalukya ruler. His name was Pulkeshin, at the battle of Narmada river. So at Narmada river, the army of Harshvardhan and the army of Pulkeshin fought with each other. Pulkeshin was able to defeat Harshvardhan, and that was end of his quest into Deccan and southern region. And Narmada river jo hai, that actually became the political boundary of Harshvardhan territory. Beyond this you have Chalukyas here, and above you have Harshvardhan. So Harshvardhan ruled for few decades. But this is the emergence of true feudalism, that even though his rule was direct in this part of the country, but it was indirect in other part of the country, that indirectly he ruled with the help of many feudal lords, but all those feudal lords accepted Harshvardhan authority, but after his death they did not. So the सबसे important source जो हर्षवर्धन के बारे में है, that how do we know this information about Harshvardhan, is actually there are two important sources. First is that we have a Prashasti of Harshvardhan, a very famous book called Harshcharitam, written by his court poet Ban Bhatt, and then another Chinese traveler whose name is Xuanzang or Huansang. They both are same person. So Xuanzang came to visit India, and he stayed in the court of Harshvardhan, and because of Xuanzang influence and also Harshvardhan's sister, her name was Rajyashri. Rajyashri was greatly influenced by Buddhism, and Xuanzang himself was a Buddhist monk. So because of influence from these two people, Harsh also became a patron of Buddhism. At one point of time, he organized a large Buddhist council, not very similar to the councils of past, but an assembly of many scholars, and Xuanzang was given very high status, but there was a threat to Xuanzang's life, because as per his memoir, many people did not like that he is being given such high status. So Harshvardhan had a proper royal proclamation that anyone who does anything wrong, they will be given severe punishment. So there is a attack on Harshvardhan life, on Xuanzang life, but somehow both of them get rescued, and then he organizes another assembly after punishing the people who are responsible. All of that information comes from Harshcharitam. So two जो सबसे important source हैं, जो written sources हैं, that is travelogue of Xuanzang and this book called Harshcharitam. So give this next heading. Post-Gupta Age. Post-Gupta Age and consolidation by Harsh or Harshvardhan. Consolidation by Harshvardhan. Right down here. After Guptas, many regional kingdoms such as Pushyabhutis of Thanesar, Maukharis of Kannauj, Maitrikas of Vallavi. Vallavi is basically region of Gujarat. Maitrikas of Vallavi, many regional kingdoms such as Pushya Bhutis of Thanesar, Mockeries of Kannauj, Maitrikas of Vallavi emerged in Deccan and southern India. In Deccan and southern India, Chalukyas, Pallavas, and Pandyas became powerful kingdoms. Became powerful kingdom. Harshvardhan, write down Harshvardhan, who belonged to Pushya Bhuti dynasty, is considered as the last great ruler of North India in ancient India. Last great ruler of North India in ancient India. सबसे जो इम्पोर्टेंट दो सोर्स हैं, there is a book called Harshcharitam, written by Banbhat, court poet of Harsh. Second, accounts of Xuanzang or Huansang, known as CUK, Some inscriptions such as Madhuban copper plate inscription, comma, Sonipat inscription, and Aihole inscription of Pulkeshin. So Pulkeshin was a Chalukya ruler. This inscription belongs to Pulkeshin, not of Harshvardhan. But from this inscription we get this information that how the march of Harshvardhan towards Deccan, that was stopped by Pulkeshin. Details about his conquest is mentioned in this Aihole inscription. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Pulkeshin in next class. Harsh ruled from, write down, 606 to 647 AD. His father was Prabhakar Vardhan, after his father's death, after his father's death, Harsh's elder brother, Rajyavardhan, became the king. So by the way, because of Vardhan, it is also called Vardhan dynasty sometime. Pushyabhuti, because the first king is Pushyabhuti, hence Pushyabhuti dynasty. But because of this surname, it is also called Vardhan dynasty. Rajyavardhan became the king. आप एक लाइन में बस लिख सकते हो. His sister Rajyashri was married to Mauryan king of Kannauj, Rajyashri was, write down, Rajyashri was kept as a prisoner by ruler of Malwa, who also killed husband of Rajyashri. Malwa was supported by Shashank, ruler of Gauda kingdom, which is basically Bengal. This prompted, write down, this prompted a fight between Rajyavardhan and an alliance of Malwa and Gauda kingdom. Rajyavardhan was killed. And at the age of 16, Harshvardhan became the next ruler. He united Thanesar and Kannauj. Again, because Kannauj king has been killed. He united Thanesar and Kannauj and made Kannauj his capital. He was able to unite many smaller kingdoms, and with the help of king of Kamrup kingdom, भास्कर वर्मन, Kamrup kingdom, Bhaskar Burman. He attacked Gauda kingdom. He attacked Gauda. Does anyone know which kingdom is Kamrup kingdom? Assam. So very important. जो कामरूप किंगडम है, नॉर्थ ईस्ट के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन हमारे पास इसलिए नहीं है फ्रॉम एंशियंट इंडिया, because you do not have written resources. You have archaeology, but archaeological digging into again mountain regions, that in itself is going to be a very difficult thing. So we have information here and there, but we do not have information about, let's say, rulers, chiefs, and the setup they ruled in. However, we have some information about an ancient kingdom called Kamrup kingdom. Kamrup kingdom is also mentioned in Mahabharata. It is also mentioned in Prayag Prashasti. जो समुद्रगुप्त का प्रयाग प्रशस्ति है, he talks about a dynasty called Varman dynasty, and he talks about that how he has defeated one of the ruler of Kamrup belonging to Varman dynasty. So that is the first reference of Varman dynasty ruling this kingdom called Kamrup kingdom. And same dynasty was also ruling the kingdom when Harshvardhan was the ruler. So almost a gap of about 200 years, but still you have this same dynasty ruling this region. When exactly Varman dynasty declined, it's very difficult question to answer, but clearly it happened before 9th century, because from 9th to again 11th, 12th century, you do not have lot of information about this region. And from 12th century, you have another dynasty which is called Ahom dynasty. And Ahom dynasty ruled this region for now next 400, 500 years. And from Ahom dynasty, Assam gets its modern name, which is Assam basically. So jo Ahoms hai, we will talk about them in medieval India. But in ancient India, this region was called Kamrup kingdom. So anyways, Gauda kingdom was not initially defeated. It was only annexed after death of Shashank. आप लिख सकते हो, after death of Shashank, Bengal was annexed. At one point of time, Harsh was ruling almost all of North India, either directly or indirectly. He planned to conquer lands to the south. But was defeated by Chalukya king Pulakeshin II, at the banks of Narmada river. At the bank of Narmada river. Thus Narmada became the southernmost border of Harsha's kingdom. Write down next bullet point. The reign of Harsh marks the beginning of feudalism in India. Many feudal chiefs emerged. Write down the next bullet point. Harsha was a great patron of art. Harsha was a great patron of art. He himself was an accomplished writer. He himself was an accomplished writer and is credited with three works: Ratnavali, Priyadarshika, and Naganand. Ratnavali, Priyadarshika, and Naganand. Again, ये तीनों बहुत important work है because again it was written by Harshvardhan. Ratnavali, Priyadarshika. Remember I told you in the very first or second, third classes में बताया होगा about Vashwadatta, that how Vashwadatta, and who is basically daughter of Avanti ruler, and Vashwadatta and his love affair with one of the another Mahajanpad ruler, Udayan. That story is famous across many stories, across many books. One of the most famous book is of course a book written by Bhas called Swapna Vaswadatta, and the other two books are Ratnavali and Priyadarshika. In both these books, Udayan is the lead character. Write on the next bullet point. Xuanzang visited India during this reign. Xuanzang visited India during this time. He praised Harsha's generosity and justice. Harsha's generosity and justice. He also mentions that judicial punishments were severe. Judicial punishments were severe. Judicial punishments were severe. However, Harsha became inclined to Buddhism. Harsha became inclined to Buddhism, and the severity of punishment was reduced. Severity of punishment was reduced. So there are many stories: throwing people in front of elephant, chopping off their hands. So such type of severe punishments were given, but this severity was reduced. आप लिख सकते हो, Harsha became a patron of Mahayana Buddhism. Harsha became a patron of Mahayana Buddhism. He supported generously to Nalanda University. He supported generously to Mahayana Buddhism. He supported generously to Mahayana Buddhism. Some of the key officials were called as following. Some of the key officials were called as following. Avanti, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and War. Ministry of Foreign Affairs and War. Banu, Keeper of Records. Keeper of Records. Kuntal, Chief Cavalry Officer, Chief Cavalry Officer, Sarvagat, Chief of Secret Service Department, Secret Service Department, Drigdhwaj, Royal Messengers, Royal Messengers, Royal Messengers, write down. After death of Harshvardhan, his empire disintegrated. Which again led to emergence of smaller kingdoms. There is a very famous inscription of Harshvardhan is found where he has written apparently using his own signature. So it is his signature. It is written here, Swahasto Mama Maharaja Dhiraj Sri Harshasya. So Swahasto basically means by his own hand, that this is written by Maharaja Dhiraj Sri Harshasya. So it's a very interesting example that Harsh is using his own signature in one of the inscriptions. So this is one again important theme. Few things about Harshvardhan, you only have to know few things. The fact that Xuanzang visited during this period. जो फॉरेन ट्रैवलर्स का अकाउंट होगा वो हमेशा सिग्निफिकेंट देखो इसलिए होता है, मैंने पहले क्लासेस में बता रखा था, दैट दे विल नॉट जस्ट टॉक अबाउट द किंग and the political setup, but they in general will talk about society, about economy, the type of people they are going to meet. So foreign travelers ka account always is a very good source of history. So very important thing is about knowing Xuanzang, the fact that he supported Nalanda University, the fact that he attacked Chalukyas but was defeated by Pulakeshin at the Battle of Narmada. So there are many things about Harshvardhan which you have to know. Not a very difficult, not a very complicated topic. Very few topics you have to know. Of course, you have to also know the kingdom he belonged to. जैसे UPSC का एक क्वेश्चन आया था. Let me show you few questions. A very simple question. From the decline of Guptas until the rise of Harshvardhan in the early 7th century, which of the following kingdoms were holding power in northern India? By the way, all of these names are after Gupta period, but only few of them are after Gupta and before Harsha. Guptas of Magad, that is true. We have talked about it, that how Gupta's rule was now limited only to Magad region. Parmars, they are very important kingdom, but this happened after death of Harshvardhan. One of the most important Rajput kingdoms is Parmars. Pushyabhutis, yes, that is true. So Harshvardhan himself belonged to Pushyabhuti dynasty. Maukris of Kannauj, that is also true. In fact, Harshvardhan's sister, she was married to one of the Maukri ruler called Grahavarman. Yadavas of Devagiri, again a very important kingdom into Deccan. Deccan region में हम वापस से जाएंगे, यादवास के बारे में पढ़ेंगे. But Yadavas again belonged to, they were contemporary of Delhi Sultanate. Last Yadavas ruler were defeated by Alauddin Khilji. Devagiri is what? Daulatabad. It actually became Daulatabad later, which was one of the capital of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. आप सबने तो पढ़ा होगा ना, दिल्ली से दौलताबाद, दौलताबाद से दिल्ली, पढ़ा होगा पास्ट में. Maitrikas of Vallavi, yes, that is also correct. So the correct answer is 1, 3, 4 and 6. So just awareness about the political development. इस पे भी आजकल यूपीएससी क्वेश्चन पूछ रही है. अब जैसे ये क्वेश्चन देखो, क्वेश्चन नंबर 6. See, second, third, clearly correct. Wages, rules of work, standards, prices were fixed by guild. Guild had judicial powers over its own member. That is also correct. First जो है, registered with the central authority. There is no problem with that. And the king was chief administrative authority on them. That is not correct. They enjoyed lot of autonomy. So जो guilds हैं बहुत autonomous थे. Many guilds were significant, they had lot of autonomy. So the first statement है, that is actually not correct. Answer is 2 and 3 only. एक और क्वेश्चन देखो. The Chinese traveler Zhuanzang, who visited India, recorded the general conditions and culture of India at that time. In this context, which of the following statements are correct? B. I want again some online participation also. Skip करेंगे. देखो पहला स्टेटमेंट जो है, completely immune from robbery. Seriously, ये completely immune from robbery, river routes, ये बिल्कुल ही ट्रू नहीं है. तो फर्स्ट एलिमिनेट करो, वहीं से आंसर आ गया. बट सेकेंड एंड थर्ड देखते हैं. जैसे थर्ड स्टेटमेंट, ट्रेड्समैन हैड टू पे ड्यूटीज एट फेरीज एंड बैरियर स्टेशंस. दिस सीम्स लॉजिकल. इसमें कुछ भी एज सच इलॉजिकल कुछ भी नहीं है. जब भी आप कोई स्टेटमेंट एनालाइज कर रहे हो, ऑलवेज रिमेंबर दैट इफ इट इज नॉट करेक्ट देन व्हाट शुड बी करेक्ट, और इफ इट इज नॉट करेक्ट देन विच पार्ट इज नॉट करेक्ट. So there is nothing wrong with this statement as such. Second statement, now second statement is actually not that straightforward. That as regards punishment for offences, ordeals by fire, water and poison were the instrument for determining the innocence or guilt of a person. अब ये देखो डेंजरस चीज़ है, बट ये होता था पास्ट में, दैट अगर तुम इनोसेंट हो तो जहर खा लो, तुमको कुछ नहीं होगा. तो ये सारी जो चीज़ें हैं, तो बट देन इट यूज्ड टू हैपन. So second statement जो that is also true, but first statement जो that is actually not correct, that there is complete immunity from the robbery. So 2 and 3 they are the correct answer. इस क्वेश्चन को करते 16. Panini is associated with Pushyamitra Shung, not at all. Panini lived in about 5th century BC. Shung lived after death of Brihadrath, right? So 187 BC, there is a gap of 400 years. Patanjali is associated with Pushyamitra Shung. तो यूपीएससी का जो सिंपल सा ट्रैप यहाँ पे था कि पाणिनि और पतंजलि में कंफ्यूजन नहीं होना चाहिए. बोथ ऑफ देम आर ग्रेट संस्कृत ग्रामेरियंस. पाणिनि नोन फॉर अष्टाध्यायी, पतंजलि नोन फॉर महाभाष्य, राइट? बट अष्टाध्यायी एंड पाणिनि दे लिव्ड almost 400 years before Patanjali. So first statement is not correct. Correct तब होता अगर यहाँ पे पतंजलि होता. Amar Singha is associated with Harshvardhan. That is also not correct. Amar Singha is one of the Navaratnas known for Amar Kosh, a great book of Sanskrit vocabulary. डिस्कस किया था हमने नवरत्नास में. सो सेकेंड स्टेटमेंट इज ऑल्सो नॉट करेक्ट. एंड यस, कालिदास is one of the Navaratnas and he is associated with Chandragupta too. So 3 only is the correct answer. Yeah, I told you such term based question. Kulivapya, Dronvapya. Answer is measurement of land. But देखो एक ऑप्शन यहाँ पे ये भी है, classification of urban land. So measurement of land, coins of different monetary value. अब यहाँ पे भी ये द्रोण वाप कुछ ऐसे जबरदस्ती का लॉजिक लगाओगे तो वो भी ठीक लगेगा. रिलीजियस रिचुअल्स. सो एनीवेज आंसर इज मेजरमेंट ऑफ लैंड. दिस इज अगेन अ वेरी सिंपल क्वेश्चन. खंडसाला, कदुरा, चौल, दे वेर पोर्ट्स. नाउ दिस इज अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग क्वेश्चन. With reference to forced labor in India during the Gupta period, which one of the following statements is correct? Let's read all these statements. It was considered a source of income for the state, a sort of tax paid by the people. It was totally absent in Madhya Pradesh and Kathiawar region of Gupta Empire. Totally absent. We can at least say that perhaps the prevalence, it was not that prevalent. But saying totally absent does not make sense. And we do know that Madhya Pradesh and Kathiawar region, jo Gujarat hai, all of them were part of Gupta Empire. The forced laborer was entitled to weekly wages. Forced laborer का क्या entitlement होगा? तो ये भी statement सही नहीं है. Forced laborer was entitled to weekly wages. Eldest son of the laborer was sent to the forced labor. चलो middle son होता तो फिर भी मैं सोचता, right? पर eldest son का तो नहीं हम करेंगे. So anyways, that, by the way, that is also not correct. First is actually correct, that yes, it was considered a source of income for the state, a type of tax which you have to pay. Anyway, would you like to attempt this question also? Again, remember ये question current affairs का question है, but theme is of course ancient history. But I think it can be perhaps attempted. At least try to eliminate few options. देखो ऐसे क्वेश्चंस में एक तो क्लियर है कि सारे स्टेटमेंट सही नहीं है, कोई भी ऑप्शन 1 2 3 नहीं है. सो एटलीस्ट वन स्टेटमेंट इज रॉन्ग. आई हैव टू फाइंड दैट रॉन्ग स्टेटमेंट. Even today, both of these systems are used by, it is part of our jurisprudence, and they have been used by judiciary in past to interpret succession laws, and that is why this topic was in news. तो दोनों को कंपेयर कर रखा है, तो कॉन्ट्रोडिक्टरी एज सच नहीं है. मिताक्षरा में बोल रहा है कि इट इज ओनली एप्लीकेबल, दिस ओनली टॉक्स अबाउट सक्सेशन टू सन, बट दया भाग इज टॉकिंग अबाउट सक्सेशन राइट टू बोथ सन एंड डॉटर. Anyway, what should be the correct answer? B is actually the correct answer. So, third statement, we are talking about succession right for female members in ancient India. ये हमने discuss कर रखा है, that was not there. Access to property was very much limited to स्त्री धन. Succession right कोई भी system हो, ये तो true नहीं होगा. So third आप आराम से eliminate कर सकते हो. That Mitakshara system deals with matters related to the property. By the way, both of them are, both these laws, they are regarding succession law. That how property should be passed to sons, mainly sons, not daughters. Daya Bhag system deals with matter related to property held by both male and female member, not at all. Third eliminate karo, you also know that second is true. Both of the options have two options. But it is about succession, it is not about lower and upper caste. ये जो है, the first statement is a completely made up statement. That one of the law is about upper caste, another of the law is about lower caste. It is fundamentally about succession, it is not about dedicated to caste as such. So first is a made up statement, the correct answer here is 2 only. Such type of tough questions, if you can skip, you can always do that. But I personally felt that some logic can be applied and you can arrive at the right answer. But nonetheless, this was a question inspired from current affairs. ये Indian Express ने अपने explained pages में detail में cover किया था about both Daya Bhag system and Mitakshara system. और UPSC ने directly वहाँ से question pick किया था. So it was a question inspired from current affairs. Anyways, in next class we are going to talk about, that will also be our last class of ancient history. But after that we will have about like 5 or 6 classes of medieval history also. So medieval history is a small topic compared to ancient history, so it will only take about 5 maximum 6 classes. But जो ancient history में जो कल के class में हम discuss करेंगे, we will talk about Chalukyas and Pallavas, and we will also talk about a battle, not one battle, but many battles which happened for about more than 150 years, very famously known as tripartite struggle or Kannauj triangle. That over Kannauj, 3 kingdoms, Palas, Pratiharas and Rashtrakutas, fought series of battles. And who exactly are Palas, Pratiharas and Rashtrakutas, we will discuss that with the help of tripartite struggle. So that will be our last class of ancient history. So I will see you guys in the next class.